Hello, everyone, again for this case study. Before we start anything and before we start asking any questions or responding with any answers, I think it's only right that we review about exactly what the story has, the characters, and generally the main problems. So let me guide myself over to the case study that we'll be talking about. So essentially, to not drag this on for too long, the case study is essentially about Taryn and about the situation with gendered bathrooms, or more specifically about how Terrence's sexual identity makes it difficult for him to access bathrooms without causing a sense of controversy, in a sense that his sexual orientation is, in a sense, very limiting, and as a student, also puts him in a position to be mocked by his peers. Though it's never specifically stated in a circumstance that Terran is being mocked, it can be assumed that because of his current position and his sexual orientation, that such an occasion could happen. So, to give some background, the characters that are included in this study are Terran, Terran and David, which was his previous name before being called Terran, Miss Harris, which is the homeroom teacher, Principal Tainer, which is the school's principal, and lastly, Miss Stoughton, which is the superintendent of the school and the same person who eventually has to, and same person who eventually pushes the agenda to pass the gender neutral bathrooms. So with that being said, I think it's only fair that we move on to the first question, which is to identify the bias and inequities found within the selection. Unless any of you guys want to say something about what you guys saw in the story that you want to point out, feel free to say something. If not, I'll be more than happy to intervene and give my own opinion.
No, I think this is just another case. Oh, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
not another case, but it's something now that we're well aware to, I guess. But um, you know, going into this week, of course, the professor said, right, this is to some like sensitive, right? So I think um this story is a perfect case scenario of something that we've seen and like seen things on social media. I know I didn't go through it. Again, we're in Texas, but at the same time, it's just, something that is new. Still, it's still kind of new. But like I said, I never went through it like while I was in school, but I know currently there are schools going through it. So it's going to be a really, interesting, discussion. So yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, I agree how it's definitely more of a an issue nowadays than it used to be. Even like I would say like 2 years ago, I feel like it wasn't that big of a thing compared to now.
Well, I also think a main point about this problem specifically is especially noting how there's not too many particular students who are experiencing a very similar problem to Taryn. I mean, there might very well be students who might be, might be having that, that how should I say this, the switch of sexual orientation, who might be experiencing, that kind of problem. But I think that more specifically, the situation and how it's being handled, I can definitely see how this is strikes as inequality towards Terran because of his position being, how should I say it, being the sole student, or at least in this story, he's being the sole student who has this particular problem. It puts him in a situation where there is no really good outcome or really good solution, especially because he's the sole student. He's the only singular student having this problem. So the school is trying to focus on is trying to cater to the main needs of the student population. So I can definitely see this as an inequality towards Tyrion, but not to say that the school is like also bad. The school's just trying to do the best it can for everybody. So um, you know, I, I can see the problem that Tyrion is currently facing because this is an inequality. But I mean, I need you need to also see about the side of the school. The school can't really do much except try to accommodate the best they can for Tyrion, which in this case is having to slap on a label for a choir bathroom, I think it was, and call it a gender neutral bathroom. Besides that, do you guys have any other can you guys spot any other inequalities or biases?
No, I pretty much agree with what you said too, how like the school is trying to do the best they can to make it equal, and when they're like the only student that is having that issue, obviously that also creates problems too for other students to feel like, well, just because they have this problem, like everything can't revolve around them just because of this. So they're like the school, like I can see the dilemma that they were in to try to make it equal for them as well as like everybody else to not feel so. It was just, yeah, it's like a messy kind of situation to kind of please everyone, which like is impossible to do in that type of situation.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with what Cassie said because yeah, for one, it's unequal for Taryn, right? Just because, right, they're having a well, he wants to be able to use the girls' restroom, right? Identifying as a girl, right? And then them having an issue, well, that is kind of not really taking into account her feelings, but at the same time, you got to take into account of others because just because it's like the majority and the majority obviously has a bigger pool, it doesn't mean that it's less. Because what if they don't feel comfortable, are you just gonna listen to what Taryn is feeling? It's kind of like I said, it's a messy situation. And that's why I think that mm, to say that there's like an inequality, I wouldn't say so. It's just I think it's just, trying to you're at a limbo until you find out really like what is equal because you at the moment you don't know what is equal because you haven't had the chance to talk with. It's just kind of like something that happened in a quick moment, but to say that there's a like an inequality, I don't think so. Just because there's two sides to it, and you got to cater to both. If not, it'll be like unequal to both of them, and yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah, and I also saw that with like it also depends like although like this is happening in different places in different schools, it also depends on who is like the principal and the superintendent. Like in this case, like they saw things differently, but it can be like vice versa in like a different school, like the principal's against it, but the superintendent's for it, or like whatever the case. Like it also like that depends on like whatever school or whatever, people are in charge at like that district or whatever. So that's like kind of like I guess like somewhat of an inequality because like that's not consistent. Like it's always going to be inconsistent at whatever school and whatever place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
especially with that, not only is it very inconsistent, but I also feel that it also has to do a lot with the local politics of the area and the school
Hmm.
politics in general, especially since politics vary from region to region. I feel that it's transgenderism, right? I don't want to get the sexual
Yes.
orientation wrong. Okay. I feel that the way that certain schools approach this problem in specific, it's like you were saying, it's a very messy kind of problem because in it's a problem experienced by a minority, and a school is just need to pander more or to cater more towards to the majority of the school. So while the school does want all of its students to feel very accommodated and very safe, um it's not reasonable for a school to put so much care into a minority and not care for the majority of students at the same time. So it's a very difficult situation, and especially with the politics that are surrounding the nature of transgenderism and the obvious culture that there is against transgenderism by more conservative means. It's a very hard problem to approach, and I feel as if a solution to this particular problem isn't really feasible, especially with how the climate currently is, with people's opinions, with conservatism, with religion, because there's so many factors that you have to include, not only as a superintendent, but you have to be aware of the cases. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but there's also been various cases where students who are granted the permission to go into females' bathrooms, unfortunately, do end up assaulting female students, despite them being male born but female oriented, students. So, and that in itself causes even more controversy. So being a superintendent in this situation, very, very messy problem. So I think that they're just trying to do the best they can because the nature of it's a very problematic problem. Basically, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, like that's what I was saying. Like again, we're in Texas, right? Like it's not to, again,
Yeah.
it's not to say like, oh, it's not supposed to be like a thing here, but no, it's just something that we're not accustomed to, and one, it's not, yeah, like it's not a norm because I used to live in California for a couple of years, and yeah, it'd be a norm over there.
Hmm.
Airports, you have you go into store, it's literally gender neutral, right? I remember like the first
Yeah.
time seeing it, it was like, oh, okay, like these things do exist, right? These restaurants do exist, or these places do exist. And yeah, you just, it's a thing you're aware of. It's not like, oh, well, you see it and it's like seeing, like a unicorn or something.
Because
The first
it's
time,
also engraved in it's also engraved in the culture, like how you're saying, right? Because like
exactly. Yeah,
in
yeah,
Texas it's very conservative, and maybe if you go upstate you'll find more gender neutral norms. But like here, where it's a very conservative state, I mean, it's kind of hard to find, or in our culture, something that accepts something like this. Because imagine how the parents would feel as well. Like, oh, you're pandering towards this specific minority, but not giving us a similar likewise voice to be heard. So
yeah.
it's very hard to approach a problem like this.
Yeah, because like in the same, in the same, I guess you could say sentence or something, you don't want to. I would like if I just would just want it to be treated equal. Like I don't want
Hmm.
my, like in this case it's Taryn, right? I wouldn't want my issue to be like the headline of the school, right? Like just make
Yeah.
it, like I said, just find something that caters to both parties, and then just call it what it is, because you don't want to make them feel special or something, because then you start getting feelings from like the opposing side, or like the other
And
side.
it becomes a like whole tornado of problems where
Yeah, it's kind of like what
people's yeah.
what's going on now. But again, like you're saying, cases such as like even in prisons and stuff like that, where transgenders, right, they go into like the opposite sex jail
Yeah.
side,
Yeah, just
and
those.
then they end up, yeah, jail cells, and then they end up being pregnant, or they end up assaulting,
Yeah.
sexually
Exactly.
assaulting somebody. So,
And
uh,
that makes a very bad view for transgender students who
Yeah,
are trying to get
exactly.
this to pass through, right? So, and that makes, and not only that, but it also affects the whole school. It's like, oh, like not even the girls feel safe in the restrooms anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's big news, especially for any kind of, not just the school, but I would also go as far to say it would affect the what's called like the district as a whole as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it
Um.
makes sense if yeah, like if the parents are like eerie about the situation because like yeah, that is common for people to just claim like oh no, like I'm a boy or I'm just a different gender in order to do that. Like that is a common thing, which
Yeah.
yeah, like it makes sense for parents to be like, well, no, like that's unsafe for
That's
my
it's
child.
a very unfortunate truth,
Yeah.
but like it's happened, and
Mm-hmm.
you just can't turn a blind eye to it because it's a
Yeah.
very real possibility.
hmm
Even
yeah,
if the student here in this story might not have that intent or does not have that
Mm-hmm.
intent at all, to possibly have that risk happening and to discredit the entire like school and the entire district's name because of that
Mm-hmm.
one occasion, it's not going to leave a nice mark
Yeah,
at
and it
all.
makes sense why, like, if that's like the reason for the superintendent to be like iffy about it, like it makes sense because if something were to happen, like it would all fall on like yeah, like the
Yeah,
superintendent
superintendent, you're the one who said,
mm-hmm.
okay, go with it.
Do
So
it, yeah. So it makes sense if he's the one that's like no, like gender neutral bathroom instead.
yeah.
I guess the only, well, in my perspective, like really the only inequality that you know that's unstated, but it's just more that there wasn't a policy or like something set in place already for, I know, I'm pretty sure this case with Karen wasn't the first case ever
Mm-hmm.
recorded in
Yeah.
history.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So for the superintendent, the principal to not have guidelines set in their schools for that, or like a restaurant set, I think that there's that was the only inequality that they didn't think of,
They didn't think
every
ahead,
student,
right?
all the students, no matter like
Yeah.
Yeah.
gender, right? Like gender identity, that they didn't put that into perspective when they came into office or something. So
Hmm.
that was the
Mm-hmm.
only quality I
Exactly.
think
There should be
that was
more
there.
foresight, right?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Let me just write that down real quick. More foresight. in parts of the superintendent and other administrative individuals. Okay. Okay, well, since we pretty much aired out most of our reasoning, I guess it's only fair that we move on to the second part of our question, which is step two, take stock of the various perspectives. So I guess we can start off with the parents because I feel like the parents would have lots to say about this. So we can say parents, administration, then student, right? I mean,
Yeah,
unless you guys want to do it a different order. What do you guys feel?
that's good.
That's good? All right.
Because
Well, I
yeah, I
guess,
think
yeah.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so, I'm so sorry. I was gonna say something else, but like my mind just went off. But
Oh.
yeah, feel free to go whichever manner you want. Parents, administration, child. I'll write it down.
Just don't
I think
forget.
it's good to start with parents because I feel like they probably do have I would think the most opinions about it, knowing that like it's
The nature of it, right? Oh, Cassie, you muted yourself.
wait, I can't hold on, I'm sorry.
No problem. Take your time. Oh, Brandon, you muted yourself.
As far as with the parents, okay,
Yeah,
there we
yeah,
go. My bad.
yeah. Go for it.
Technical
Yeah.
issues. Um, I'm gonna. I don't know. I'm not speaking for Cassie, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like you were saying, it is scary. Knowing that, whether I don't have any kids, right? But I would think that, having a daughter or a son out of school, um, with all the like with the gender, right? Like, um, with boys and girls, right? As you're, I don't know what grade level did it say. What it was in no, right? It didn't specify what grade level, but elementary or middle school, it can cause sort of confusion. Whether it's in middle school or high school, right? With like hormones going on, again, like we were talking about the cases, or really just there's a whole like can of worms when it comes to possibilities of what can happen to my daughter or son. Um, I don't want them if they're in elementary or middle school, like, it's their innocence is really should be taken into account in these things just because I think that when a kid, right, sees something that's confusing to them, they start, they're just confused. And then when confusion, I think, arises, and they don't know what to do, I think that the possibility of like making a mistake just based off of like not knowing what's right and wrong, um, yeah, all those possibilities are there. But it would be scary just, if I had a daughter or like even a son, and then, someone of the different sex were to come into the restroom and me not knowing, I
Yeah.
think it would, I would be upset that I didn't know about it because,
Mm-hmm.
if my son's having to go through or my daughter's having to go through that issue, I can just imagine like what goes through their mind. And it's not that there's nothing wrong, but I think it has to be talked about because you have to prepare your daughter or your son for those situations, and that way they have something to protect themselves or just kind of like stay in the
Yeah.
lane to where they
I
don't get,
completely, yeah,
yeah.
I
Because
completely
it
agree
also
with you
makes them
because,
more
yeah.
like vulnerable too. Like the students are more vulnerable.
Hmm.
Yeah, not only that,
Yeah.
but I also feel that despite the fact that like it is a negative stigma to like, kind of have people say like, okay, like, like be aware that these people will like it's kind of negative, but it's a reality. This is the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the situation. I feel that it's only natural for people to, especially like parents, to be very protective of their children, especially the female occupants, because there has been studies and there has been news articles and all this that does put these transgender students in negative light, but it's a reality that you have to consider because it does happen and it can happen even if it's like a male on male student sexual harassment that does happen, or female on
It's
female
still,
student.
yeah.
Yeah, it's still a problem that has to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than putting such a negative connotation on just transgender students, because like sexual assault happens regardless
Anywhere,
of gender,
yeah.
any gender. So
Mm-hmm.
I also feel that maybe when parents talk about, should talk about that perspective about like how a transgender guy could go into, female bathroom, they should
Mm.
also acknowledge that that sexual transgression can happen with any gender, regardless
Mm-hmm.
if you're a guy posing as a woman or a woman posing as a guy and going with it can happen at any point, but
Yeah.
there's just a lot of negative connotations specifically with transgender students, specifically male students going into female bathrooms. So
Yeah.
that's just my 2 cents on the problem.
Yeah, and I see it that way, and I can also see maybe the parents of like the transgender student having maybe like concerns too, because as well as like maybe if the student wants to do that, the parents can also have concerns that it might like how the student was saying that like they were getting harassed and stuff like that could also happen. Like if there's a female going into the male's bathroom because that's what she claims that she
Yeah,
is, like boys are also not, they can harass her and say like, well, that's not right, so that
exactly.
also can
Yeah,
be an issue.
Yeah, I think that that can be the same thing too. It can be maybe at their Terrence's household, right?
hmm
Maybe it's a norm they're accepting, their parents are
Hmm.
accepting and everything, and then it might cause like some confusion, like as to why. I mean, as to why, maybe they're getting just so much like hate or bullying
Hmm.
and something. So like
exactly.
it might, in their and Terrence's parents' perspective, I think yeah, it would be the same thing, scary, right? Like as to what is my child like, gonna run into when he goes into these
Yeah.
bathrooms. Um, so that's a good
Or
point.
how is he going to be
Okay.
viewed by other students, right? Like, if he goes to a special bathroom made specifically for him, how will other students interpret that? It's not like, oh
Hmm.
wow, you have a special bathroom. That's not, that's not exactly like a very positive thing to like point out.
Hmm.
Like, so, and to move on from parents to administration, I feel that specifically that this problem in general with the old gender neutral bathroom, I feel like that's really the only like reasonable like answer. Like, this may not be the only answer, but I feel that especially now with how the nature of transgender youth and how especially in politics, how progressive and how well how do you say it? Like how spontaneous it is, how like with politics and everything. I feel like having a gender neutral bathroom, while it's bad for him, because it's basically like his sole bathroom where he can go through and feel comfortable. I feel like that's really the only realistic situation. I mean, do you guys have maybe any other situation I could probably put here for the administration? Or I mean, that's just my 2 thoughts. What do you guys think?
Hmm.
I mean, really, but like I guess viewing what the principal was saying, like I don't think she had any hesitation in letting Karen go into the restroom
Hmm.
um before, right, the gender neutral bathroom came up. I think in her mind it was something, again, just yeah, like harmless, not that she wasn't taking into consideration what could have happened to the other students or Taryn, but that could be kind of like another perspective too, like from the principal or from the administration. Like again, it's just depending on the district or the school you're in. But I think I think it could be to where they see it as yeah, maybe like the gender neutral bathroom is one option, but it could also just be like um getting like a policy set or just something to like protect students from like discrimination, right? Like set maybe like I wouldn't say like punishments, but set consequences for
Hmm.
any bullying. But again, that's like a whole kind of worms. But I think that's just another possibility.
Exactly.
Like, hey, um, hey, the students are coming into the bathroom. There's obviously consequences for both sides. We don't want,
Hmm.
yeah, sexual assault is sexual assault. It doesn't discriminate. So I think
Exactly.
like whichever way it happens, there's consequences, and
Hmm.
we can all accept it, and just kind of like not make it into a big deal. And these are consequences, and we're gonna act upon them. And that could be another perspective
Yeah,
that
like
the administration could have.
yeah,
Yeah.
like add further consequences, because I feel that especially with transgender youth and how susceptible they are to being bullied, I feel that I think it would be fair to add more policies for hate speech, because I mean, like if a student has to go through that, especially bullying in such formative years, like I kind of want to say to add more, more punishment if a student goes out of the way to have hate speech. But then again, like that would kind of undermine like just bullying in general. Because if you say that hate speech should have more negative consequences than just regular bullying, then like that would also cause problems. Because like like oh like let's say if a mom's having a problem with another student bullying their child and they only get like what, a suspension, and then if another student does hate speech towards another student, they get suspended for like 2 months. I mean, like that's not fair.
Yeah.
Like the other student that bullied my son should also be suspended for 2 months. So like like to enforce something like this, it's like I said, like it's a whole can of worms. Like to be on top of that administrative position, especially in the parents' point of view
Yeah.
and the students. I mean, it's. I mean, unless you guys have something else to say about
It
students,
is,
yeah.
yeah, like it is messy too because like as we're saying, like maybe have policies that like, it's okay, like, this is what's gonna be the new norm or whatever. That also, can cause problems too, because if like, yeah, religious family is like, no, like I'm not okay with that, like I'm not gonna be comfortable
Yeah.
with that. Then that's another thing, like, okay, like, it's never like it's like impossible to please everybody because, there's gonna be issues everywhere. So it's just like it
Exactly.
is like a real complex situation.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think I have more than enough to keep on writing, but in that case, we can move on to step number 3, which is consider possible challenges and opportunities. I think we already talked more than enough about challenges. So if maybe you guys just want to reiterate about what we talked about, then I'll be more than happy to build off of that and write it in.
Yeah, just like the challenges of being like the unfairness, one student feeling like it's not right and some students feeling like that's how it should be, as well as like the families, like parents feeling unsafe with their children going into the same restroom as, the opposite sex and stuff like that. Like those are all, there's multiple challenges here too. And as far as like obstacle or like opportunities, right? That's
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
As far as opportunities, I would think maybe just opportunity of like trying to make this school more like what's the word like
Diverse and
yeah,
inclusive,
more
kind of.
more like inclusive, like how to, do that in a way that doesn't upset anyone, but still trying to include the, fairness and inclusiveness of everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say like as far yeah, I mean it and everything it shouldn't be like a roadblock. I think thinking outside the box as to
Mm-hmm.
where this situation can lead to. I think that you can either choose to hide it or really like run with it and use it as an opportunity to, you know, one, let your staff know about, what's going on with this homeroom. Of course, deal with it just one-on-one first, right? But then take account of like the situation and then start as a principal, you want to make this again, like kind of like with all the other cases, you just kind of like make the situation aware. And then I guess like there's a lot of possibilities. I wouldn't say like again, you have parents and you have students that kind of like have their own thing at home and they may not be open to LGBTQ, right? Like, transgenderism and stuff like that. But I think if once the principal talks to like the teachers and then kind of like, have some sort of maybe like it's Pride Month right now, right? Obviously, like maybe sort of take a they have gone through a lot as far as like hate and oppression and like as well as discrimination and stuff, just kind of like letting students know that this thing is real, just just be careful about what you do because again at the end of the day you're human beings, they're your peers. Some of you may have parents and just kind of just take the opportunity to just kind of let your students know that there's nothing wrong with it and they should accept it, and or if they do or they don't, they should at least be able to be respectful of others and their feelings, because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was
I
gonna say. No, sorry, continue.
that's okay. Yeah, no, that's the only opportunity I think I can see coming from this.
Yeah. I agree with what you said. Like, you know, not you don't have to, you know, the administration stuff doesn't have to tell everyone to like be for it and be like all about it, but at least to be respectful and be able to not have to, you know, be hateful towards it while still not having to like, you know, completely, you know, agree with it just as long as they respect it, you know, and I think the more that the administration and, you know, teachers are like okay with it and like just respectful of it, the easier it will be for students to see that and kind of just, you know, yeah, go along with it and not really have it, you know, become a whole issue.
Yes. Mhm. Well, I mean, now that I recorded the problem that that we all kind of expected for for like the parents to understand with the situation, I feel that it's only fair that we now move on to step 4, which is imagine an equitable and just outcome. Like I said earlier, like I don't really like for me personally, I don't really see a really good solution that could, I don't see a good solution probably because I haven't given it enough thought or foresight. But if you guys could maybe jump in and tell me what you would try to approach, like like a new solution, a new policy, a new something, like what would you guys try to instill? Like what would you like? How would you guys go about solving this problem? In a way that satisfies both parties. Feel free to interject and say whatever.
We have about 2.5 minutes, so if someone wants to go ahead and just make a quick assessment of it, you can go ahead.
Yeah,
Or if
let's do it.
not, and we can just jump into the other video too.
Yeah, I think we should jump on to the next video so we can just save ourselves the hassle, just, in case it gets cut off.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and